I'd like to spend the next few minutes taking you through a morphological analysis of the word deactivation. We'll draw a tree for this word. And whenever we're drawing trees, we have to be very good at identifying syntactic categories of the different bases that we create. So we need to always have in our mind how to identify nouns, verbs, and adjectives. So we use the template that I've provided to you in class before, the blank of where the noun fits into that slot. I can blank where the verb fits into that slot, and the blank thing where the adjective fits into that slot. So using those 3 sentence templates, we should be able to figure out all the syntactic categories of word components as we progress. So the first thing we need to do when we're drawing a tree to show the morphological structure of words is to isolate the root. And make sure you go all the way down to the actual smallest root component, which in deactivation is the word act. Once we've isolated the root, then we need to pay attention to what other morphemes there are in the word, certain prefixes and suffixes. And again, we have to make sure we break it all the way down to those individual parts. So there's an iv in there, there's an ate in there, and a shun. So it's easy to gloss over some of them, but make sure you break it down all the way. Once you've figured out what other morphemes you have, then we need to recreate some rules that we will follow when we're drawing the tree. So let's start with the prefix D, and rather than having memorized all those morpheme combination rules, as long as we memorize a guide word that we can use to recreate the rule, we should be fine. So if you've memorized demystify, and you know that mystify by itself is a verb, I can mystify you with my tricks, then we know D plus the verb mystify creates a word demystify, which is also a verb. And that should be no surprise because we know that prefixes never change the syntactic category. It still fits into that slot. I can demystify you by showing you how I did the trick. Next we have iv, and if we use the guide word creative, then we know that the word create is a verb. We add iv to a verb and we generate creative, the creative thing, the creative person, which is an adjective. Then we have ate, and if we think about the guide word authenticate, then we can figure out what kind of word authentic is. The authentic thing, the authentic person, that's an adjective. And I can authenticate something, turns the word into a verb. Then we have shun, and I go back to my favorite root, create. We again know create as a verb, and this time we add shun to generate a noun. So those are the rules that we need to make sure we follow at each step along the way. So next thing we do is draw a branch straight up from our root and label the root based on the syntactic category that it belongs to. And in some cases, it's ambiguous, and this is an ambiguous case where act could either be a noun, the act of the play that I was starring in, or it could be a verb. I can act a certain way. So this is why we need to follow our rules. If we take a quick look at our rules, we see that both D and iv have to be added to a verb. So we know to classify the root as a verb. Next step is to figure out which morpheme we're going to add in to our tree next. We could either add the prefix or the first of those series of suffixes. And so now we have to think both about meaning and about possible combinations. And according to our rule up there, both D and iv can be added to verb bases, so that doesn't really help very much. But if you think about the meaning, this prefix D is a reversal prefix. It kind of reverses the action indicated in the base. So demystify is to reverse the mystification, I guess. So that sense of reversal doesn't really work very well with act, and we don't have a word deact. So that biases us towards going over and linking in iv. So we draw a branch straight up from iv, label it AF for affix, and then we have to decide the syntactic category of active. The active thing sounds like an adjective, so draw 2 branches up, link them together, and label them according to the syntactic category. We go over to our rule just to make sure. Our rule says creative. We have iv added to a verb to generate an adjective, and that's exactly what we have here as well. Now, for the next morpheme to add in, we now know we can't add D because D has to be added to a verb and we don't have a verb. So that means we go over to 8. So we add 8, draw a branch straight up from 8 up to that second level, label it AF for affix, And then we have to decide what kind of word activate is. What syntactic category does that belong to? I can activate the procedure. Sounds like a verb. Draw 2 branches straight up, label it V for verb, and go over to our rule just to check. And our authenticate rule says 8 is added to an adjective and generates a verb. So we're still following the rules just fine. Now, at the next stage, we're not really sure what to do because both the prefix D can be added in and the suffix shun can be added in. So this is the stage where we kind of just have to do trial and error. For example, let's say we decided to add shun first, and we draw a branch above shun, label it AF for affix, and then we've generated this word activation. Activation, the activation of the module is a noun. Once we've identified a noun here, the next stage would be to add the last morpheme in, the prefix D. But according to our rule, we don't add D onto nouns and we don't generate nouns out of D. D we add onto verbs and we generate verbs. So if we did the tree in this order, we would have a violation of the D rule. So we know we can't do it in that order. So we have to backtrack and add D into the tree first and save shun for our last morpheme that we combine into the tree. So we draw a branch above D, label it AF for affix. Now we have to figure out what kind of word deactivate is. And according to the template, I can deactivate sounds like a verb. And according to our rule, demystify, D gets added to a verb and generates verbs. So we're fine. And now we can add shun as our last morpheme in, and we know shun gets added to verbs. Deactivation, the deactivation of the module is a noun, and according to our rule, shun is added to verbs and generates nouns. So we verified all along the way. At each stage, we have a situation where we only have 2 branches joining together, so we're following the binarity requirement. And we also label each level according to the syntactic category of the word underneath it that it represents. And there's our completed morphological analysis of deactivation.